They came to me asking why the gods had abandoned them, why fate had turned so cruel, why the world had become so unkind, so unpredictable, so unmanageable. I looked into their weary eyes, farmers with blistered hands, soldiers with broken hearts, and scholars with torn beliefs, and I saw the same thing staring back, the desperate need for someone to blame. A god, a storm, a ruler, a war. Anything but the reflection in the mirror. But what if the thing we fear most isn't chaos? What if it's the terrifying clarity that no one else is coming? No savior. No justice written in the stars. Only us. What happens when we stop asking the heavens for a way out and begin asking ourselves what we can do instead? How does a man survive the burden of responsibility and discover that it was his liberation all along? Let me tell you how I learned. I was not born an emperor. I was made into one, shaped by war, loss, duty, and choice. And the first illusion I had to bury was this, that I controlled everything or nothing. There is a temptation in both beliefs. The man who thinks he controls everything becomes arrogant. The one who thinks he controls nothing becomes a slave. But in truth, we control only one thing, our response. The rest is wind. You cannot order the seas to calm, but you can learn how to sail. And that is where responsibility begins, not with power, but with posture. How do you stand in the storm? My father died when I was young. My teacher, the great Antoninus Pius, trained me in silence, in principle, in action over words. He never told me how to be an emperor. He showed me how to be a man. Each time something broke around me, an alliance, a friend, a battle line, I felt the instinct to blame. It is the child's reflex. It wasn't me. But maturity begins when you ask, what part of this was? You see, when you take ownership of your choices, your mindset, your values, you stop waiting for life to apologize. And that is the birth of peace. It is easy to point outward. The harder thing is to turn inward. But the inward path is the only one that leads to real strength. Responsibility. The word itself feels heavy, like a chain wrapped around the shoulders of those who dare to carry it. But let me offer another image. Imagine a sword, not to wound, but to cut through illusion. Responsibility is the sword that frees you from victimhood. It was in war that I understood this best. The plague had struck. Soldiers were dying not from arrows, but from unseen enemies. Disease, despair, rumor, and all eyes turned to me. Fix it, they whispered. Save us. I had no cure, no magic, but I had presence. I had will. I had the ability to say, we will not abandon each other. I showed up, not with answers, but with accountability. And slowly, like snow melting under the sun, the fear began to break. That is what responsibility does. Not just for leaders, but for every soul. It dissolves paralysis. It creates movement, not because the world becomes easier, but because you stop running from it. There's a lie passed down through generations like a family heirloom, tarnished, cracked, but clung to with the grip of the desperate. The lie is this: I would be free if only I were not responsible. But responsibility is not the enemy of freedom. It is the price of it. I learned this walking alone in the gardens after the Senate had betrayed my trust. Men I had protected, honored, and raised, now speaking venom behind my back. And I asked the sky, why must I carry the weight of others' treachery? The answer was silence. But it was in that silence that I saw a truth emerge. When you carry the burden, you choose the direction. To abandon responsibility is to surrender your compass. To say, let others steer, let others decide what becomes of me. No, that is not freedom. That is driftwood, tossed by every current, broken by every rock. Responsibility is the anchor that keeps you from being swept away. It does not mean you control the storm, but it means the storm does not control you. I chose to remain still. I chose to act justly, even when surrounded by injustice. I could not silence every whisper, but I could keep my own voice clean. And that is where power truly begins. Not in dominion over others, but in dominion over self. There is a phrase I once carved into the edge of my writing table. If it is endurable, endure it. If it is not, stop complaining. This was not callousness. It was clarity. Every day, men brought their grievances before me. My soldiers, my advisors, my citizens. And I listened. I did not dismiss pain. But I also reminded them, you are not powerless. You may not change the world today, but you can change your stance toward it. One man told me, but Caesar, I didn't ask for this life. And I said, nor did the oak ask to grow on the cliff's edge, but there it stands, defying the wind. We do not choose our conditions, but we always choose our character. That is the secret tyrant's fear, that a free man is not one who owns land, but one who owns his choices. Sometimes responsibility comes cloaked in sorrow. I lost 5 children in my lifetime, each one a son extinguished far too soon. And there were nights I would lie awake, my chest crushed beneath a grief no crown could lighten. In those moments, it would have been so easy, so natural, to curse the fates, to scream into the void, "Why me?" But the path of grief is not made shorter by blame. It is made bearable by responsibility. I could not bring them back, but I could honor them in how I lived. I could be kinder because I knew what it meant to lose. I could be more present with those still beside me, because I knew how fragile life was. And I could lead, not with cold detachment, but with the warmth of a man who had suffered and still stood. Responsibility is not always grand. Sometimes it is simply getting out of bed when the world has gone dark, lighting a candle when others despair, speaking gently when rage would be easier. Every time you do this, you reclaim a little more of your life. You stop waiting for the world to make sense, and begin making it make sense through your actions. There was a day, years into my reign, when Rome trembled beneath its own weight, fires in the provinces, dissent in the legions, and whispers of rebellion. Advisors pressed parchment in my hands, each bearing news worse than the last. It would have been so tempting to escape into apathy, to say, "This is not of my making, let others solve it." But that would be surrender in disguise. You cannot control every fire, but you can choose to be the hand that does not tremble while extinguishing it. So I rose before dawn that day, not to command armies or pen decrees, but to sit quietly and remind myself, I am not Rome's master. I am its servant. But that is where my power lies. To be responsible for something greater than yourself is to be bound and freed in the same breath. You sacrifice the illusion of control and gain the substance of meaning. Because a life without responsibility is a life without weight, and what is weightless is easily discarded. I saw it in the nobles who fled duty for comfort. They aged quickly. Their faces grew pale, their eyes hollow. For all their luxuries, they were impoverished in the soul. Responsibility anchors you not only to others, but to yourself. It reminds you daily of who you are and who you strive to become. There was a soldier once, a young man from Thrace, who was falsely accused of treason. I remember his eyes, wild with fear, ashamed not of guilt, but of the disgrace placed upon him. He said to me, "They call me traitor. If I am punished for it, then I may as well become it." I placed my hand on his shoulder and replied, "Then they will have one twice." Responsibility is choosing who you are when others decide what to call you. It is refusing to become the worst version of yourself, even when the world invites it. You are not what has happened to you. You are what you choose to do now. The burden is heavy, yes, but the alternative, the life without weight, is far more crushing in the end. I have seen the hollow men who carry nothing. No duty, no principles, no courage. They drift, and in drifting, they perish long before death claims them. To bear the burden of your choices, your past, your flaws, your growth, that is the cost of a noble life. And a noble life is not one free from scars. It is one where every scar has been earned in the service of something meaningful. Now perhaps you wonder, what if I fail? What if I try to own my life and stumble beneath it? You will. So did I. Responsibility does not make you perfect. It makes you honest. And honesty with yourself is the bedrock of transformation. There were nights I wept behind closed doors. Days I questioned my worth, my wisdom, even my will to continue. But each time, I returned to one truth. My actions are mine. They belong to no man, no fate, no storm. And so long as I rise again, I am not defeated. That is the quiet power of responsibility. Not the power to control the world, but the power to endure it with dignity. And in that endurance, to shape it, inch by inch, into something better. There was a morning, cold, gray, forgettable to most, when I stood alone at the edge of the Palatine Hill. Below me, Rome stirred, vendors setting up stalls, soldiers sharpening blades, beggars waking beneath marble columns they'd never own. And I thought, this city does not need a god. It needs a man who refuses to look away. We are tempted to see ourselves as victims of fortune, as passengers on a ship we did not build, sailing through storms we did not summon. But the truth is far simpler and far more powerful. You are not merely a passenger. You are the helm. Even when the skies darken, even when the map is torn, even when every hand but yours lets go, you steer. And if the vessel sinks, you go down as its captain, with honor, with resolve. Responsibility is not about blame. It's not about punishment. It's about ownership of your thoughts, your words, your impact. Even when the world is unjust, you are not excused from the duty to be just. Even when love is betrayed, you are not excused from the duty to be loving. Even when chaos roars, you are not excused from the duty to remain calm and clear and centered. We often ask the wrong question. We ask, why me? But the better question, the question that liberates you, is this: if not me, then who? That is the soul of responsibility. It is the moment you stop waiting for a savior, the moment you become one, not for the whole world, but for your part of it, your home, your work, your inner life. Do not chase perfection. Chase presence. Do not chase control. Chase character. Responsibility is not a crown placed on your head. It is a weight placed on your shoulders, and it is only through carrying it that you stand tall. So now, as you finish this moment with me, ask yourself, where have I let fate take the blame for what I have not yet faced? Where have I chosen comfort over courage? And more importantly, what will I choose now? Because the burden is also the path. And on that path, you will find not only your power, but your peace. You do not need the world to change for you to live nobly. You need only to accept the noblest truth I've ever known. The life you're waiting for begins the moment you take full responsibility for the one you already have.